I think our higher self is connected to the spiritual realm and these spiritual teachers for the path that we're on and the existence that we've been born into. I
Mm.
mean, that is the best way I can explain it. The information that was shared with Wilma Jean Jones, my mother, it's like it's woven with a universal thread. And everyone who has read these messages have said, well, this sounds like what I'm dealing with. This sounds like they're talking to me.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Michael McAdams with us. I'm really excited to have a conversation with him. He has written a book called An Angel Told Me So, and it's a collection of messages from spiritual teachers that he's collected over time. We're going to dig in deeper to what that means. He's going to be able to explain that a little bit further. But thank you so much, Michael, for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for having me.
I always start each interview the same way. Anytime I'm talking to somebody, I always have to go this way because I think it's a personal interest of mine, and I like to kind of get the background a little bit. And I look at, little Michael, as I always say, everybody is, at one point in your life, you're a little person, a little kid, and I look at the life you lived then, and then I look at the life you're living now. And I try to see if there's comparables between the two, if there's been big changes in your life. I try to get a little bit about who you were as a kid, maybe could be religious, spiritual backgrounds, things like that, but just a little synopsis of who you were, a little bio of who you were as a child.
Sure. Yeah, I was brought up in an extremely religious family with a foundation of faith. My mother was extremely religious, Pentecostal church. And for people who may not be familiar, Pentecostal is evangelical Christian. Pretty strict, literal interpretation of the Bible. My grandmother was a Pentecostal pastor. She pastored a small church north of Cincinnati in Ohio. My uncle was a fiery Pentecostal pastor, and he had founded churches in Florida, Kentucky, and Ohio. So that was my background. Even when I was young, though, I always had questions. I mean, I just didn't really accept a lot of what I was being taught. And I think a lot of people feel that way. You know, we know the story, we have a foundation of faith, but a lot of people feel, well, there has to be more. There must be more. And recently I read a post and it said, I don't want to just believe, I want to know.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, I think today, we have a foundation of faith. And the nice thing about a foundation of faith is you can build on that. And it's not anything that conflicts with those that pray and reach out in thought to the spiritual realm. And that spiritual realm, if you have a foundation of faith, that spiritual realm is heaven. But I believe that the spiritual realm is so much more than just a place called heaven.
I would assume you came to that conclusion through what you're about to tell us and the things that you went through in your life, because a lot of times when you're a child, I'm the same way. I actually didn't have much religion growing up. Later on, became Catholic. I just, as a decision, a personal decision of mine, I got baptized later on, late teens, early 20s, that type of thing. And at the same time, though, I've always been kind of more of a spiritual seeker. And you just hit it right on. It's always this idea of needing more of a knowing than just a belief. And so that's probably why I run the show. trying to bring more information to people and convince a little bit more of myself of the things that I already feel. And so you had this upbringing, and I guess I do have a little bit of the backstory of what happened with you and regarding your mother and everything. But when around did that happen? Like, what time frame or age were you when this started to kind of occur? When was it when you lost your mother? Because I know that's something that I don't want to go too far ahead right away, but is that when things started to change for you?
No, actually, like I said, even as a teenager, I was interested in spiritual material. I would attend psychic events, psychic fairs, and I was just led in that direction. And we're all on a path. And on my website, spiritspeaks.com, it says for all sincere seekers of truth. And then it says when the student is ready, a teacher will appear. And for me, that has been appropriate in my journey because as I was ready, I would be told or introduced to a person, an event, a movie, a book that would always take me to that next step on my path.
Mm.
And I believe that that's what people are looking for. Uh, we know the story. Like I said, we have a foundation of faith, but we have been told to just believe and have faith for 2,000 years. And people are now ready to know, really know, um, what the communication with our spirit teachers, which again are the same thing as angels, is like. Now, people with the foundation of faith, again, they reach out in thought in the form of prayer and communicate with the spiritual realm. And there is a spiritual realm adjacent to this physical plane that we are separated by a veil, a vibration, a frequency. We don't really know what the medium is that separates this physical plane from the spiritual realm. And we're not alone. We're all spoken to. We receive guidance, direction, and support most all of our lives. Many people may think it's just their imagination, their conscience. I'd slow down up ahead if I were you. I wouldn't buy that car if I were you.
Mhm.
Where does that come from? And we have the ability to accept or reject any advice, guidance, direction, support that we're given. And if we do reject it, we normally do so at our own peril.
Mm. I love how you mentioned that about the little messages we get because I was just talking to another guest about how I'm getting to a point where I think when I was younger, my mind was so busy. If I got those kind of messages, it would get kind of lost in the chatter of my brain. I couldn't distinct the difference between what was my thoughts and what was these messages. And as I've learned to calm some of those noises down, I don't know how else to describe it. I get more of these direct messages. There's no real emotion attached to it. It's just a very direct kind of message. And then I go, okay, I'm going to take that and I'm going to feel it and try to understand why am I seeing that. And I kind of honor the message for a moment. And then it just, at least it sits there. So I don't know if those are warnings or whatever these messages are. It could be actually somebody with me. I could be sitting and talking to somebody and I can sense something's going on and I'll bring it up with them. And at first they'll kind of, no, nothing's wrong. And then as the conversation goes, it's like, oh, this is confirmation. This is exactly what I just heard. And I go, wow. So you start to experiment with that, but you have to calm the mind down because otherwise you get lost with all your other thoughts. I got to get groceries today. I got to pay my bills. I got to, whatever it is, they're getting lost with those messages. So that's why I'm a strong believer in, meditation or whatever could be someone's meditation. Mine's music, for instance. I calm down more when I sit with my music. Some people need it in different ways, but I think it's a good practice to get into. So I don't know if that's what happened with you and how you came to these messages that came through for you. But maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Like, how did this all come about?
Well, I had always been spoken to. I mean, even when I was young, I just felt that I was receiving information. And what you're talking about is just being informed,
Hmm.
continuously on a level and it's a subtle difference. The incoming thoughts that we receive from our own spirit teachers, and people are assigned, I believe, a spirit teacher when they're born. Actually, there is a book called the Urantia book, and it talks about personalized thought adjusters. And it says that at the age of our first moral decision, when we make a decision that shows that we know right from wrong, usually at around 4.5 years old, that we are then assigned a personalized thought adjuster, spirit teacher, guardian angel, and that adjuster will stay with us for life. And being able to communicate with the spiritual realm, again, the incoming thoughts are different. They have a different feel in your mind than thoughts that we think. We can think and look and as you talked about, doing all the stuff that we have to deal with in our daily lives. And then without thinking anything at all and driving in the car, radio turned off, a thought will come into your mind. And it's like, where did that come from?
Hmm.
And if you pay attention and can differentiate between thoughts that we think and thoughts that are incoming, then you can take advantage of a gift that we all have, that we're all born with.
Mm. And the other thing it just came to me right away was it's also sometimes outside of our thoughts. For instance, I've lost my father and my grandmother, and when my grandmother passed, I was very close to her. She was my lifelong love of my life. And then my father had passed, and I wasn't really close to him, but I was driving towards. I was going to go visit his grave. You know, I was going to go visit, and after he had passed, and while I was driving, a song came on, and I can't remember the name of it, but music has always spoke to me. And part of the line was, "It's been 5 long years since I've seen your." I can't remember what it is, but there's this line that was coming in. What I hadn't realized, it had been 5 years since I lost my grandmother. So as I'm driving, this song is repeating, and I'm hearing it, and I'm feeling emotion, right? And I'm thinking, why am I feeling this? And the moment I understood what it was saying, I went, oh, here I am, you know, and I'm like, I need her right now. And then here she is. And so, meaning this wasn't even coming through as a message to me. This was a divine, like, I don't know if they're able to go in and alter the sounds of the sound waves and the music. I have no idea. But I mean, I had to pull over because of the emotional reaction I had from this. I've always said, and I say this a lot on the episodes, is a lot of this comes from awareness, right? Like we have to be aware of what's going on around us. And some of us get so busy in our lives that we don't stay aware, like aware of our surroundings. And I think that's the first step. You got to get your awareness online first. And somehow I always had that. I've always had that as a kid. And I take that moment to go, well, what is really going on around me? So whether it's messages coming in or messages coming through other means, right? It could be something else someone says too. And if we're
That's
not,
true.
right, if we're not aware of being in that present moment, we're not taking that in. So, and I'm, of course, I know you know all about this because of what happened with you. You know, I was looking over some of what happened, and I was seeing that, you know, one of the big, I, I would say one of the big reasons why this show has gotten, you know, popular around near-death experiences is I think a lot of people are looking for answers as to who we really are, what happens when we pass, like, you know, and these types of things. And I guess the one thing I'm always trying to do is to address like fears around death and the unknown, right? And you know, in getting messages like you have and writing this book that you've written, did that help in your own personal life around those questions? Because you know, maybe you can dig in a little bit about what happened to your mother and stuff, but I'm just wondering if that helped you.
Well, I tell people, I said, there is no death. We never really die. It's just graduation. We
Mm,
ride around in these bodies the way we ride around in our cars. These bodies are just a vehicle to negotiate this physical plane. And I was talking, I had done an interview with a lady who said, well, this brings to mind the movie Avatar.
mm,
And, we've all pretty much, it never stops being aired. It's on all the time. And to be able to instill your consciousness into another body and be able to exist and live in that society is almost like what we're doing here on Earth. And I look at the children born to Bill Gates and Steven Spielberg. They'll want for nothing. Granted, they'll have their challenges, but that kind of wealth and connections makes all the difference in the world. And then you've got children, born to alcoholic fathers, drug addicted mothers, maybe abusive parents. And you could be born in communist China, Iran, Russia, North Korea. You don't know where you're going to be born. But I believe that we're assigned to a certain set of parents in a certain social station for whatever it is we're supposed to learn in this lifetime.
mm. I have that belief too. I've even spoke with people who've had not only near-death experiences, but remembrances or memories of pre-birth. And in those pre-births, you know, they were kind of in this different realm, obviously, and kind of knowing who their parents were going to be, the different obstacles that were going to come up, you know, come up in their life. There may even be what we call, you know, trigger points in their life that'll come bring things more online. Might be when they're only
Right.
70, even not, you know, it might come up later on in life. But these moments when you start to kind of, oh, these memories come back online. And so, you know, that being said, if it's all predetermined, I think there's also free will. I do believe in that. I believe that things can kind of ebb and flow through life. I'm on that belief as well that there's certain teachings that we're supposed to have, but we don't know where we're going to be thrown into. Maybe if you could share a little bit about how this came about, how the book came about. What was the main purpose of the book, and how did it all come about in your life?
Well, I had again gotten into spiritual material. I actually used to do psychic readings. I had a table at a group called Psychic World in Cincinnati, and I did psychometry. And You can hold rings, watches, keys, anything that carries a person's vibration. And I had a legal tablet, and people would sit down at my table. I didn't pump them for information. I would just ask their first name, and they would give me something to hold, and I would just relax my mind, and I would start to get a message. And sometimes it was a page, page and a half. When I got to the end, it just stopped, and I would read it to them. Sometimes they'd cry. And it was more confirmation, as to what they were going through rather than actual prophecy.
Mm.
And I had gotten into various books and speakers uh, long before my mother was really open to spiritual material because she had such a religious background. And I asked her one time, I said, "Do you think you could have an open mind?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "I can have an open mind." So I introduced her to the lady that was running this psychic group, and she just opened up, and this information that would flow from our spirit teachers, and that we're all born again with our own spirit teachers. And people are not required to drop down in deep meditation or do yoga or do anything except be willing to receive, be willing to accept the information that's shared. And just as an example, my mother one time, and she had been receiving these messages for a while, but she wasn't sure if she wanted to publish these, to put them in a book. And I was the one that said, this material is just too deep, too profound, and it seems like it applies to everyone that reads it. And so she was working around the kitchen one day, and these words started to come into her mind. She knew it was incoming. She picked up pen and paper. She had beautiful handwriting, and she took this message down. And this was a message that she felt was confirmation. She should put these messages and teachings in a book. She'd been praying about it. May I share this message with you and your audience?
Oh, absolutely.
Emptiness is part of fulfillment. Let your resources fill the void left so that distinction of your purpose can be found. Expression is always self-explanatory. Therefore, look inside and anchor all your beliefs beside those still waters that will take away your troubled view and renew your strength to recapture that which was lost, but is now found to be adequate to pursue the course set before you. And as you reconcile your being to represent those qualities that have been left intact, God will see to it that although circumstances have been trying, to say the least, your weariness will disappear as clouds once removed allow the sun to shine to dispel the gloom and darkness that has pervaded your countenance. And as once described before, a token of this presence will be deposited to your account and books recorded in his name.
Wow. And that just came right through to her.
That she received that in thought.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when she was led to sit down in these dedicated sessions, she would be led in her mind, "We have a message for you." And she had set up an electric typewriter in her kitchen. And she had a little table set aside, and she would go in, put a sheet of paper in the typewriter, drop down 5 lines, indent 5 spaces, just like you were going to do a letter. And she would always say a prayer asking for protection because you are opening your mind. And she would see 3 or 4 words just float into her mind and hang there. They would not go away until she typed them.
Mm.
Once she typed those 3 or 4 words, they would just fade away, and 3 or 4 more would show up. And that's how she got these messages. Full page, single space typed, many times with no paragraphs. And in these messages and teachings, the spirit teachers repeatedly refer to themselves in first person. We feel, we believe, we advise. Our view encompasses more than your view can comprehend. One line in a message said, "We hear the spirit cries above the words you speak." Who talks like that?
Right.
I don't talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just an amazing body of material. Many of the messages and teachings are signed with the name of the spirit teacher that presented the message.
I like to usually I hear everyone's life stories and the things going on, and the way that I conduct things is to relate to them. And the beginning of this show, there's a beginning song and an end song on my show, like an intro and an exit. And it's my song because I write music for a living. And the song is called Soul Vision. And the way that song came about was I was going to sleep one night. I went to brush my teeth, and it was really late. I'd stayed up way too late. It was about 1 a.m. And I thought, I gotta get to sleep because I gotta get up in the morning. I'm brushing my teeth, and I'm hearing this song in my head. And I mean, that's not an abnormal thing. As a songwriter, sometimes we get ideas for songs, but it just kept kind of hitting in my head. Well, I thought, okay, that's annoying. I got to get to sleep. So I went and laid down. I kept hearing it in my head. I kept hearing it, and I thought, and it was driving me crazy. I couldn't fall asleep. So I thought, okay. So I ran down. I had a little studio at the time. Ran down, went into the studio, grabbed my guitar, and just hit record. And I just started just singing and playing the song. And I did it and I went to sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, I was able to sleep. That's my point. Is when I woke up in the morning, I thought, what an odd dream. That was a really strange dream. I dreamt that I had written the song and like, what was I doing? What was that about? And I laid there for a while. And then it kind of came to my mind that was that a dream or was that real? Was that a real event that happened? Because again, it was late in the evening the night before, so I was kind of out of it. So I ran down to the studio like a kid, first day, Christmas morning kind of thing. I ran down all like there's no way, and I went in there, and sure enough, the song is just ready to go. It's sitting there, and I play it back, and I think it was one of the first moments that I thought, okay, this isn't all me. This isn't all me. Like some of it is, but is it? How much is actually coming through me? And so that's why that song became part of my first album. It was the name of my first album in 2015. But again, the reason I'm bringing up this story, you said something really powerful there. She was getting these messages, and she had to type them out. Like she had to bring them outward, right? So you're getting this message, and you have to put them out. And the reason I can relate to that is because when I'm writing music, I have to release those songs in order to go to the next song. I've come to that conclusion. And if I just sit back and I don't follow my purpose of what I'm supposed to do, actually it affects me in a very negative way in health and everything. It doesn't feel good. And I think a lot of people can relate to that in different things of their life. It doesn't have to be music, but it could be arts. It could be, did you get out to do your gardening that day? It felt like you needed to, like whatever our part of our drive or purposes we're, that's part of who we are. So I think with your mother, by the sounds of it, is she was getting these divine messages, these things that needed to come out onto paper or on typewriter, and she had to put those out in order to get the next one. And that's kind of is that fair to say?
I That's fair to say, and it's amazing the people that receive this information are we're all capable. And a lot of people say, well, these are spirits. I don't know if I want to really mess with spirits. And I explain to people, I say, we're not talking about spirits or phantoms. We're talking about spirit teachers, real celestial beings from the other side, which from a religious perspective, they would be angels, guardian angels, archangels, the parking spot angel. We
Right,
don't really
right.
know. Oh, I have a park. I know a number of people say, yes, I have a parking spot angel. And I reach out to that angel every time I'm going somewhere. And lo and behold, there's a parking space up close, just right where I need it.
Hmm.
And it works that way. These spirit teachers, their joy is in our recognition of their existence. And the Bible says, test the spirit. Well, these spirit teachers, they don't mind taking a quiz. They're happy to just say, prove yourself. And when you were talking about receiving that song, there's been a number of musicians, famous musicians that I've seen interviews with where they said, well, this song just came to me and I sat down and wrote this hit song in like 20 minutes and it just wrote itself. And I believe that's our spirit teachers sharing this information, knowing the path that we're on and what we're going to do with the material once we receive it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one question I was going to ask you just to get your insight on it is, you know, I've always questioned these, and I have to use song as my method of transportation of the messages. But so for me or for your mother, whoever might be receiving messages, people out there listening in, is it always coming from a spiritual teacher, do you believe? Or do you think some of this is our higher self as well?
I think our higher self is connected to the spiritual realm and these spiritual teachers for the path that we're on and the existence that we've been born into. I
Mm.
mean, that just is the best way I can explain it. The information that was shared with Wilma Jean Jones, my mother, it's like it's woven with a universal thread. And everyone who has read these messages have said, well, this sounds like what I'm dealing with. This sounds like they're talking to me. And she would be led in a session. She would receive a message addressed to her from her spirit teachers. And then she would receive a message addressed to me in my spirit from my spirit teachers. And it would take 3 to 4 hours in a session to receive these two messages. As the years went on, higher teachers started moving in, giving even deeper and more profound teachings. It's like they started spreading the word on the other side. Look what we found here. We have a willing receptacle in Wilma Jean who's willing to sit down and receive these messages. And when I tell people, I said, when you get the book, an angel told me so, read each message once as it was given for my mother and given for me. Then read that same message again as if it's being presented for you and see what hits. And it's amazing what hits.
Wow. And so when she was getting these, how many years did she receive the messages? Like how long was this going on?
22 years. This
22 years.
started in, I think the first message in volume one, the first message is August of 1977. And she received these messages and teachings up until the year 2000. So it was, 22, close to 22 years or a little over. And it's just an amazing body of material. Now, on my website, there are tabs at the top, bio for me, bio for my mother, and there's a television interview that my mother gave in Cincinnati. Posted on her interview is a message from volume two of the book, which is not out yet. I'm looking for a new publisher. And this was the only time in a session in all this time that she was led to sit down and receive. Two different spirit teachers moved in the same session, gave two different messages, and signed two different names. And it was obvious that the second teacher was a different teacher than the first because the whole cadence and phrasing of the message is different.
Mm.
And this first teacher's message, it was a little more than a long paragraph. May I share this message with you and your audience?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this will just give your audience you and your audience a feel for how these spirit teachers speak. They don't talk the way we do. There is a resurrection period through which man must travel in order to come into the realm of things godlike. You are to consume and digest all that is given here, as this comes from one highly qualified to meet the needs of this generation. You are not the sole property of yourselves. God still holds the everlasting command over your being, and in him must one take refuge. You are to be considered as one who has been stripped of all belongings and left to die by the wayside. In this manner, are you then open to any help that would be forthcoming? You are by your very nature ones who would depend on your own intellect to carry you through. However, by giving of your soul into the hands of God, do you prosper and develop more freely into that which denies the outcome of some situations, knowing full well that it is the hand of God leading and directing you so that you may arise victorious in the end. There is never a time when you will be without the Father or his ever-loving approaches to see that you follow the path that directs you homeward. Take note that we say homeward, as your heavenly Father so resides in that vast insurmountable environment of time and space, so shall ye abide in joint communication with him by the grace with which he covers you and by your ability to accept this grace and use it for your own development. There are others here who wish to make themselves known to you, so I will step aside for this time. My love and devotion follows you as you trod onward but ever faithful to your goal. That message was signed, your loving guide. Now that next to the last line is the line that makes me sit up and take notice. He says, there are others here who wish to make themselves known to you. My question is, what do you mean there are others here? Who are the others? And where is here? Where are you in relation to this physical plane?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's amazing. I'm gonna go into a direction here that I've wanted to speak with you about because just to ask again, was your mother she was a religious person. She was part of a religious.
Extremely religious, daily reader of her Bible.
Okay.
Even while she was doing this, I
Mhm.
mean, like I said, Pentecostal religion is just pretty strict, and evangelical Christian is something that you don't take lightly.
So one of the, I wouldn't say it's not a challenge, but it's one of the interesting things that I've come to notice and running this podcast is the feedback I get from the audience, and it's just different audience members. Some of them would consider themselves a spiritual person. Other people would consider themselves religious, whatever they were raised with. And there sometimes is a little bit of a pushback from people who are strongly religious or have a strong religious belief system in some of the content. And some of the content in shows like my own will have individuals on, for instance, who will be channelers, right? People who channel messages. They might go into kind of and again, their cadence changes, their the way that they present themselves. Sometimes it's almost you look at them and they almost look different. Their physical features change, like the way
I've
their
seen that.
face. And so when they do this, they, I mean, in all respect to their life, they a lot of times they love what they do. They've seen it as a blessing and these types of things. But then you have people who will see this as like a demonic procedure, a something from some bad realm that to not get involved with. And there's this feedback that I've seen. And I don't know the answers to this question at all, and this is why I'm wanting to talk with you about it. But did your mother, did she have to come to terms with this at all? And did she wrestle with this idea? Like, where is this coming from? If, is this a good energy? Is this a bad energy? Any of that kind of stuff? Like, what is your takeaway from any of that?
As you read these messages and teachings as they were given, they repeatedly reference God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
So these are spiritual teachers. And people, especially with a religious foundation of faith, the Bible talks about, beware of soothsayers, and they all the information that they might give. And I know what you're talking about as far as channeling. Sometimes they'll speak in a different voice and they do take on a almost a different facial appearance. And that is channeling. And then there are people that do automatic writing where they will sit down, relax their mind, tune in, they'll have a tablet and a pen, and their hand will start to write and they'll get a message for someone. I've never done either one of those things, and neither did my mother. But because we're all spoken to and thought, we have such a close connection with our spirit teachers. The best thing that I can tell people is to surround yourself, establish an aura of protection, a protection that you can surround yourself with so that nothing that does not come from God or his direct representatives will be made known to your mind. You can use affirmations. There are a lot of people that say different affirmations. I've been given two or three here over the years. And you're just making sure that anything that comes into your mind is not of a negative nature. And if something does slip through and you say, well, wait a minute, I didn't think that. I don't want that thought in my mind. Then you can just discard it, send it out into the universe. And each of us have our own personal thought system, like a little mini solar system that exists in our mind, made up of everything we've ever dealt with, everything we've ever thought or said. And you can keep your thought system clean by just, do a little housekeeping and make sure that all of this information that's available comes in as a positive nature.
Mm. So it's also not, and the first thing that one of the things that came to me as you were speaking again is the to not surround yourself with the fear of it, right? Because if you're basking in fear, then you're probably bringing in more negative energy, I would think, right? Because, I think that's the first initial reaction. If someone has let's say, a negative reaction to a channeler or someone who's getting a message, it's based off the fear of what is that? Who's that from? You're going into fear. And like you just said, if something comes in that doesn't feel, of divine nature, of something that's positive, you can just let it go into the universe, right? You can just let it go. You don't have to hold on to it and let it stick to you. You just kind of let it go. But I do believe, just like we look around our earth or we look around the world, I have to say, I mean, there is things that are feel positive and there's things that feel negative. And there's people who do not so nice things, and there's people who do what we would consider nice things. So I think there is a negative and positive pull either in this realm or the other realms. I think I'd have to be, I mean, I'd love to believe it's all a big holiday over there, and that everything's happy and great and positive. I would believe, but I do think that there's probably teachings going on all different realms. And so just like someone who says, don't do that, that's of demonic nature, don't get into that. Well, then you're completely eradicating entirely of who we are by our truest nature, which is a soul or a spirit having this life experience in this body in this vehicle. And if you ignore that entirely, I think it's very unhealthy for us as our in our life existence. If we're completely not connected at all, I think that's what leads us into some more troubling areas of life. I don't know. That's just my belief. I
Sure.
don't know if you feel the same way, but that's yeah.
We have such a close connection with the spiritual realm. And again, these spirit teachers that have been assigned to us will help us in this existence. And I recommend actually two movies that will open portals in people's mind. And I don't know if you've seen these or not, but the first one is called Defending Your Life. That has Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep in it. These are older movies.
Mhm.
Defending Your Life. The second one is called Always, and that has Richard Dreyfuss and Holly Hunter in it. And it will give you a perspective of this existence that it'll make you think.
Mm.
And I have people that have asked this same question before. And it's almost like we've had throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, angels, archangels, God spoke to man and gave all this information and teachings and warnings and that sort of thing. And why did it suddenly stop? Did we stop listening? I
Mm.
don't think they stopped speaking to us. And then again, with the Bible saying, beware of soothsayers, look at what happened during the Salem witch trials. During that period where people who were receiving may possibly guidance, direction, support, hearing messages being spoken to, and that, well, if you are receiving anything like that, it must be a witchcraft. And
Mhm.
so that was beaten out of people, and we were told, well, you can't be receiving anything because it could be evil and negative. And as long as you can establish that filter of protection, that aura of protection, and an affirmation that came to me years ago, it just came into my mind like it was given. And it said, let no thoughts, ideas, or information be made known to my mind that does not come from God or his direct representatives. And let that be your mantra, let that be your filter, and filter anything that would come into your mind, um, filter it through that affirmation. And then you can decide over and above that what you want to read, what you want to allow into your mind, and what you want to discard.
Mm. I think it's so funny that you just brought up the affirmation because I was the next question I was going to ask you was, do you have a recommended affirmation that people can kind of, become accustomed to? I think that you can also change those for your own, what makes sense for you, right? If something's a little bit too drawn out, or it doesn't have to be scientifically the same. It doesn't have to be exactly written the same. One thing I used to say when I would feel I was getting involved in the spiritual realm and things like this, and I'd get kind of the fear would kind of seep in. Oh, maybe I should, I'd say, okay, I'm gonna, all I would say is, whatever's going on in my life, please protect me with the white light. I would say the white light of the Holy Ghost. I would have this whole like idea of what that meant to me. But I would imagine this white shield of armor that would just protect, and anything that would come in that was harmful to my good energy or beingness would kind of just go, oh, I don't like that, and it would leave. So I would just imagine it, and I would say it in my head. I don't know whether it worked or not. I would like to think it did. I feel like I've, continued to become a pretty good person in this life. So I think that I try to stay away from that stuff. But I think it's actually real. I don't think we really appreciate what our thoughts are actually doing and where our thoughts actually coming from. We're always fixated on our thoughts are from our brain. It's this piece of meat that's stuck in the top of our head. And for one thing, I've really come to the conclusion is these people I talk to on a daily basis who are on the brink of death and they jump out of their bodies and they realize they're still thinking. Like there's still whatever we call thinking, whatever our thoughts are, they're still existing. These and they go, oh, that's not from my brain. That thing's down there, and I'm over here, and I'm doing this, and what's even more amazing is the moment they have a thought, it's immediate over there, right? So there's none of this delayed time like we have here. They just think it, and it's boom, it's right there. It's like, oh wow. So they're discovering their thinking is even more powerful than we even believe it is. So you have to be really careful of your thoughts and be careful of what your that's why awareness is good. It's not to be scared. I don't say that to say to people to be scared of your thoughts because we're human beings. It's not, this isn't the easiest journey we're ever going to have, so be good to yourself, but at the same time just be aware of your thoughts. Be like, okay, is this serving me in a positive way?
It's been repeatedly said that thoughts are things,
Hmm.
and thoughts are things. What you can conceive, you can create. And it's interesting, the white light that you talk about in spiritual material, they talk about the Christ light. And that light of protection is something that you can surround yourself and connect to. And again, you're deflecting using that light and based upon, thoughts that you think, which we have that pesky little gift called free will. And we can accept or reject any advice, guidance, direction, or support that we're given. So you need to listen to your thoughts, pay attention to your thoughts, and do a little housekeeping every now and then, just to make sure that you're on the path that you want to be on. People, they get off the path and they go off on a tangent, and then well, how did I get here? What am I doing over here when I should be over there? So it does make a difference. These spirit teachers in these messages, they repeatedly end the message with either a deep, profound last paragraph or a deep last sentence. And this session where the two spirit teachers moved in the same session, where the one spirit teacher said that there are others here who wish to make themselves known to you, and he stepped aside. Another spirit teacher moved in, gave a page and a half, single space type, and I won't read the entire message, but this last paragraph was extremely deep, and it was signed with a different name. May I share this with you and your audience?
Absolutely.
So this was the second teacher's message, and this was the last paragraph. You are not as sheep herded here and there, but you are likened unto the lamb that is cared for individually, nourished and loved until the full and total development allows it to be master of itself. So is man so kept, and denied only those things that would not in the long run nourish his spirit. God is all wise and loving in his dispensations. We are not to judge the workings of our Father, nor are we to judge each other. Work always to improve your own beings, for in the end time, there lies your soul, with all the nourishment that you have given it, totally dependent upon the outcome of your intentions. And that message was signed, your loving spiritual teacher.
Hmm. That must have been amazing that she had, and was that just one occurrence where she had two different messages come from two different spiritual messengers, I
In
would
the
say?
22 years that she received these messages, that was the only time where two different spirit teachers moved in the same session,
Hmm.
gave two different messages, and signed two different names. A lot of the messages were signed by different names. Your loving guide, your loving spiritual teacher. She received a message that for her, one time that was signed, your spiritual counterpart. I have messages that she received for me that were signed, your spirit brothers, your spirit light.
Hmm.
So these were different beings that moved in. And then the messages, as the years went on, they became more profound, even deeper, longer. And one of the messages, the spirit teacher that was presenting the message said, there are other teachers here There are other teachers here that present this message to us, and we in turn present it to you. So in the spiritual realm, there's even higher teachers. There's multiple levels of teachers, spirit guides, spirit teachers, just like angels, archangels, guardian angels.
Mhm.
And in this spiritual realm, I believe there are numerous levels of teachers that, high teachers that will share this information. And, we exist here on this earth, third rock from the sun. If you've ever seen that show, that was
Yeah,
a good show, Third
yeah.
Rock from the Sun. And we're out here on the very edge of the Milky Way galaxy. We don't really understand or comprehend the vastness of this physical plane. And the Milky Way galaxy, that's our home galaxy. That's our point of origin. If you've ever seen Stargate, that's our point of origin. And the Milky Way galaxy is 2,000 light years across. That's 186,000 miles a second times 2,000 years, 1,000 miles thick, billions of stars, potentially trillions of planets just in our own galaxy. That if they're in the sweet spot where we are, far enough from the sun where you have atmosphere and water, but not too far where it can't exist. And I believe there's societies and civilizations and life all across the physical universe. And we just happen to be existing here. We're here for a good time, not a long time.
Mhm. Right. Wow. Did she, I just have to ask a few quick questions here. Did your mother, the entire time she was receiving these messages, did she feel like these were messages for the people, like for people, or did she feel like they were for her?
Well, I mean, they were addressed, like I said, she would receive a message specifically for her from her spirit teachers, and then a message for me from my spirit teachers addressed to me.
Hmm.
But as the years went on and the higher teachers started moving in, the messages she would receive were not addressed to either one of us. They would many times mention us and what we were dealing with in the messages, but they were more, general in nature. They weren't necessarily addressed to either her or me. That's why they seem to be so applicable to everyone that reads them.
And I was going to ask that, so I want to find out how people get in touch with the book or how they get in contact with you or whatnot, if you can answer that. But when someone's getting the book, if they get the book and they're looking at it, is there a specific way there should be like, do you just read it front to back? Like, are you or, like, is it, because to me, if there's messages throughout this book, I would see it more. I guess I'm a believer that, things come to us when they're supposed to type things, right? So I can't see it being just you just read through the entire book. Is there a certain way that you're supposed to address the way the book is laid out?
Well, you don't read it like a novel. And I've had interviews that I've done where the host will hold the book up on camera. And this one lady had 7 or 8 different color plastic tabs that were sticking out of the top of the book for messages, personal messages that she felt were just hit really hard for what she was dealing with and what she was going through. And these were favorite pages that she had saved. And the book itself, I weave a narrative as to what was going on, in my mother's life and my life, as these years, as the time went by. And then that leads into a message. And then she would receive messages, 1 or 2 a week. One time she received 3 messages in one day. And again, we're talking 3 hours or more to receive a message. And she was just so willing, and she just felt privileged and honored to be able to connect with these spirit teachers, and be able to receive this information that she felt, again, should be shared.
Hmm. It reminds me a little bit of Conversations with God, right? The is it Neil Walsh?
I know that book, Neil
Yeah.
Walsh.
Yeah.
And Wilma had been receiving messages for, I'd say, probably about 10 years. Neil Walsh's first volume came out in 1995, and there was a lot of buzz about it.
Hmm.
And do you know Neil Walsh's story? Do you
I
know
I know the
anything?
story. I haven't had the I haven't
I mean,
read
his
it.
story about him personally.
Oh no, I don't. No, I
Yeah, he
don't.
was living in Medford, Oregon. Um, um, his life was a mess. He'd been married 3 times. And one day he got all ticked off at God and wrote this scathing 3-page letter to God, you know, like it was God's fault the way his life had turned out.
Mhm.
And supposedly, when he got done writing the message, still had the pen in his hand, he started getting a response. And he wrote the response, posed a question, wrote the response. That became the first book, Conversations with God.
Mhm.
And because of everything I was reading about it, I bought the first one, got through about two-thirds of it. And the quality of the messages and teachings that Wilma received from these spirit teachers are probably 10 levels above the information that Neil received.
Mhm.
And he was supposedly talking to God. But in that book, that first 3 volumes and a study guide sold 4 million copies.
Mhm.
And he had churches. He had sent a lot of copies out for free to churches, and they would have study groups like Bible study, and they would read his book and talk about the information that had been received. And to me, it didn't really sound like answers that I believed that God would give based upon the messages and teachings that I had access to coming from these spirit teachers in the messages that Wilma Jean, my mother, received. But the best thing that I can say about that is that it opened the door for so many people to be able to accept that this information could be received from a spiritual realm. They were
Mhm.
just, so much easier to accept that. And I think they're ready to move on to a higher level of information.
Mhm. That makes sense, and it's just like it's the same thing with Dr. Moody's book, the near death experience books that he put out. That was kind of a big moment where people were accepting the near death experience, right? People held back and didn't talk about their experiences for so many years. So there are kind of pioneers, I'll say, that come out and release this content so that it becomes more acceptable. I mean, I always say, look at us now. We're sitting here talking about this kind of information in 2025 in such an easy way, but 50 years ago, this would have been completely unheard of, right? Even the conversation itself would have been secretly had in a, someone wouldn't be able to hear this kind of information. So, and the book itself, is it available everywhere, like Amazon? Like how do you get in touch with you and your website and all that stuff?
The book is available on my website, spiritspeaks.com. It's available through Barnes and Noble. It's in Barnes and Noble's system. Ingram is my national distributor. Any independent bookstore, if people have a favorite bookstore, that bookstore can order it through Ingram, and it's also available on Amazon.
Mm. And it's called An Angel Told Me So.
An angel told me so. And I tell people, I say, but how do you know this to be true? An angel told me so.
Right.
Now, in these messages, if I might, I know we're getting short on time here. My grandmother, I said, had been a Pentecostal pastor, and she would receive sermons dictated to her mind in thought that she would write down and preach in church. And she would even receive verses to songs that she would write down. And in the photo gallery of the book, there's a page of 6 verses that she received that she would put to music. And she was lying in a hospital in Columbus, Ohio, had diabetes. They didn't think she was going to make it. And she received these 6 verses while lying in the hospital. And I've had people say, well, your grandmother received, your mother received. They said, do you receive? And I said, yes. I said, I've been spoken to and I've received messages. And when I was first looking for a publisher, I was on a number of different publisher websites. One of the websites asked questions about your work. One of the questions was, what makes your material unique? Why would anyone want to read this? Great question. And I'm sitting where I'm sitting right now at my computer. I didn't really even ask for an answer. I just relaxed my mind, and an answer started to be dictated to my mind. It was 12 lines long. May I share this answer with you and your audience?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, I take no credit for this, but I just think it was an amazing answer. The uniqueness of any material is in the manner in which it touches the soul. An open and searching mind pulls the soul and the body in which it inhabits onward and upward with hunger and determination in its quest for spiritual nourishment, ever mindful that the path upon which we walk is the path toward God. Lives lived, experiences endured, goals accomplished, and loved ones lost are all encounters upon that path. Strive always for the highest possible communication with our Heavenly Father. Believe in yourself, as the Father within you is guiding, leading, directing, and comforting you upon this journey that we call life. Blessings be upon you as you walk your chosen pathway.
Mm.
That was not me.
And that can apply to a lot of people. I mean, it's funny when you're saying it. I'm taking it in myself, so I can understand why people would take to this material because it's oh, and the other question I was going to ask you was the book then was it published after your mother's passing? That
It was.
it
It
was.
was.
It
Uh,
was.
she continued to receive messages. Then she ran into some health problems as she got older, and I wasn't able to publish the first volume
Mm,
until after she had passed.
I was just
But I'm
personally,
doing,
yeah.
I'm actually working with a publisher. We're negotiating, and I want to do a revised edition of Volume One. This Volume One of An Angel Told Me So came out in 2017. So I've been advised to do a revised edition for current release, and then two more volumes. And
Oh.
it's just an amazing, amazing body of material.
Do you have the book there with you at all? Does it look like a certain, just in case anybody wants to see what they're looking for when they look? Oh, okay. So it's got a picture of your mother on it. Nice. Okay. And one of the so I would encourage everybody to check out it's spiritspeaks.com, which is a great website. And you can get it has links to where you can get the book and but it also has some of the material on the website or just different information around the material.
Correct. There's the television interview that my mother gave. There's the message from the spirit teacher. If they scroll down to the middle of the home page, there's a painting that I have at home, and there's 5 hidden messages in that painting.
Hmm.
So they can take a journey through the painting, find the hidden messages. The last message that they'll find is the message that my mother received in thought, where she had been praying about whether or not she should put these messages and teachings in a book.
Oh wow.
Then I also have a contact page, and when I do these interviews, I always share with the host 3 messages from Volume Two, and that message that I received in answer to the question, "What makes your material unique?" So, if any of your listeners are interested, if they want to contact me, I would be happy to share additional information.
Oh, that'd be great. Well, I would encourage anybody listening in, if this speaks to you, to definitely check out the website. I always soul inspired when I started this podcast. I always kind of had a direction I always wanted to go through. This has been an amazing conversation, and there's a lot of other questions I could have went through, but I guess with time we have to kind of end it. But I always try to ask you from a personal, just on a personal note, through the life you've lived and the things that you continue to do. I look at everybody and I say, here we are in this human body. You and I are having this conversation, and what we feel is real. I'm starting to discover what real is after talking to a lot of people and what real feels like. Because a lot of people, once they have their NDE, they come back and they almost feel like this isn't as real. And I don't know how else to describe the word real, but it's our human language. So, our English language, I should say. But I always try to ask everybody, what if you were to come up with any type of reasoning as to why we do this, why we come into this body and do this in life, what is the main purpose of our existence? What are we all here for?
I believe we're here to learn and grow and become, to be better than we were before we came. One of the lines in a message that was given to me, it said, "Blessed is he who remains always in understanding of his calling." And
Mm.
I believe that we all have a calling for whatever it is we're supposed to learn or do in this lifetime. And, we do the best that we can.
Yeah. Well, and if I can interpret what you're saying too, it'd be the idea that to always, I don't want to say to always stay on track, but there's times in our life where we feel like we have a drive or we have a direction we want to go, and to continue through that, to try not to get off track, right? To like we have a purpose, we have a kind of a destination, and to keep going towards that destination. Is that kind of what you mean by that?
I would say, I mean, people, we have lives that we're living, and life is distracting. And people realize that I mean, you can be involved in spiritual material and close to God and receive from your spirit teachers, but doesn't mean that you're still not going to have, car trouble and have to work on your car, or possibly family issues, with things that you're dealing with your family. But just know that we're not doing this alone. that
Yeah.
we have our own spirit teachers, spirit guides, angels, again, if that's your perspective, and that all of this material is available and we're on a path. And what you're doing and what I'm doing is really just shining a light on the path and saying, look this way. If you're shining a light in the darkness and people say, well, I don't know which way to go, I don't know what to do. Well, look, try this way. Take a look at this and let them accept or reject any information, guidance, direction, or support that they're given.
Well, I appreciate you, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your information. And I do encourage everyone to check out your book again one more time. An Angel Told Me So, and it's spiritspeaks.com is where you can find the information. I turned to the audience at Soul Inspired and I say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe. If this particular episode spoke to you, or you think you know somebody that this would speak to, please share it, because sharing helps. And leave any comments in the comments section. Helps the algorithm, gets our content out there further. And I'm sure Michael would like to answer any questions if anything came out. So thank you again so much, Michael, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.